So I'm going to talk to Bobi Wine now, because we're talking about young people getting involved. I also want to talk about young people supporting young people, because again, this is a conversation that's it's been happening in Africa. Young people coming to the polls and becoming candidates and so on. Now, assuming that we solve the problem of youth voter apathy, which, for instance, we've heard from Kisani in South Africa about what's happening with apathy. But assuming we solve that problem, how confident are you that young people can back young people? Will young people vote young people into office, or will we go back to a situation where we're bringing in people that should have transitioned to younger leaders? And how do we manage that? How do we navigate that?
Thank you very much. We have looked so much at the young people, but like one speaker said, that the young people of today were the babies of yesterday, and will certainly be the elders of tomorrow. We happen to be living in a generation where there's not so much difference in the minds, the young and the old, the male and the female. We tend to share understanding to look at things largely the same, because what is right to the young and to the old, and what is wrong to the young and to the old. So for the young people, it's just the numbers and the shared aspirations and the shared pains, but largely we look at the same wrongs and the same rights. However, allow me to go back a little bit and mention that while we are discussing the continent of Africa, especially from here in Europe, I would rather that we focus on the realities. It would be very naive for us to discuss Africa from the lenses of a comfortable European. Let's look at Africa through the lens of an African, and look at the Africa-Europe partnership and define it. Is it a partnership in crime, or a partnership in the rule of law? Is it a partnership in democracy, or a partnership in autocracy? Is it a partnership in good, or the partnership in wrong? Is it a partnership in development, or a partnership in underdevelopment? And looking at that, I think it's important for us not just to look at the leaders. Well, everything rises and falls with leadership, but let's look at the people. We look at the people of Europe and the people of Africa, and look at them as equals, as human beings, and look at them as deserving the same standard of democracy, the same standard of human rights, and the same standard of respect for the rule of law. Of course, while we have progressive African countries like Zambia, which we look at so much, we look up to so much, countries like Botswana and many others which we look up to so much, we must not forget that there are blatant examples like recently Burkina Faso, countries like Chad, countries like Mali, where there's been blatant disrespect of democracy, but in very neat suits, we see European leaders seemingly condoning that, not criticizing that, and that is to the detriment of Africa. We look at countries like Cameroon. I was looking at the African Cup of Nations, where the head of state in Cameroon can barely walk, where they have to walk to him to hand over the trophy. And that's a shame to Africa. And that is something that Europe must not be seen to be part of. Countries like Uganda, where I come from, where last year, on the 18th and 19th of November, more than 150 people were massacred in broad daylight for peacefully protesting. But the world looked and kept silent. In Uganda today, pictures, images are coming out from Uganda where the son of the president will tweet and somebody will retweet disagreeing with him, and that prolific writer called Kakwenza will be picked and whipped, slave trade style. The images that used to come from the slaves of the 17th and 18th century will show up now, and the international community is just going to look at that. What kind of partnership are we having you know, we have an Africa today, in particular Uganda, where just yesterday the Speaker of Parliament was flown out of the country to get medical attention, but it cost the taxpayer $500,000 just to airlift the Speaker of Parliament and many other things. So in an Africa where it is acceptable for the leaders to seek medical attention outside the country, to have properties in developed democracies, properties bought with corruption, you know, I think that partnership needs to be re-evaluated. Of course, Europe is a continent that we look up to, with developed democracies, with laws that are deemed such acts unacceptable. We have the global Magnitsky, which should be evoked for such. We have sanctions, which should be evoked for that, and many other things. I think that African dictators have been largely encouraged and propped up by the West. You look back in the days of Idi Amin, he was a Ugandan leader who was largely, you know, cordoned by the West until they let him go. So I think a time has come for the West to let go of the evil and disassociate itself with the evil. Then young Africa will have opportunity to meet, like I said in the beginning, that young Africans and young Europeans are first world brains, but African young people are first world brains stuck in third world countries, which wouldn't be third world countries, but have third world leaders. So until we deal with that, the entire partnership is going to be a lie. But when we deal with that, you will see every other question being answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobi Wine. You made very strong points, and you actually even pointed out the situation in Mali and Burkina Faso. Interestingly, if we now take an average of the leadership age in West Africa, I presume that it would come down a bit. You know, obviously, if you're not giving young people a peaceful way to transition, what you will see is these kinds of parliament. What can you share about how some of the young political and social activists we're seeing rise all across Africa? What can you share from your experience about how they can organize their collective agitations into effective political structures that can have impact on election day?
Thank you very much. I've been listening to the submissions of various people, and I kind of have a feeling that I wish I was from those areas. Well, I speak from a rather peculiar view. I come from a country which is probably the youngest population in the world, Uganda, where we have more than 85% under the age of 35. And indeed, for the last 4 years, we have been banking on that, looking at that young population. We don't look at it as a liability. We look at it as a resource, especially if it's galvanized, if it's called upon to, you know, come together and make a decision together. And that was a reason why we started what we call the People Power Movement in Uganda, to call upon young people to get involved in the decision-making and then in the political dispensation of their country. And indeed, we were able to call upon young people who turned out in millions to vote to decide their destiny. Now, the challenge here is, unlike many other places, what is the response of the authorities? As I speak right now, we have thousands of young people in Uganda rotting in torture chambers, rotting in jails. Why? Because they raised their voices non-violently to say they want a leader of their generation. Like I mentioned, we have a military leader in Uganda, and I believe many other places in Africa, but particularly in Uganda, we have a leader that has been in power for 36 years, who came to power by use of arms, and indeed has used arms and force to crush all voices of dissent. We went to the polls in January last year, and people turned out massively to vote. Unfortunately, the internet was blacked out. The European Union and United States election observers were blocked from the country. I was a presidential candidate, but by the time we went to the polls, I was under military detention in my house. So this scenario makes every thought impossible. It makes all the ideas impossible. Now, being on this platform, I will also raise it that the international community is not innocent to this. While young Africans have aspirations and indeed have dreams for Africa, while they are first world brains stuck largely in third world countries, they have thoughts, they have aspirations, they want to transform Africa because they see what other young people are doing in the rest of the world. But because we have authoritarianism, which I don't tire to emphasize, then everything, every thought, all the intelligent ideas tend to hit a block wall. And like I mentioned, being on this platform, the international community is not innocent to that. Of course, the young Africans appreciate the voices that are raised by the international community in terms of statements. But the fact that the international community pours lots of money in terms of aid to Africa without following it up with calling upon the authorities in Africa and in particular in Uganda to ensure that it is not just business, but it is the values, the democratic values, the values of the respect of the rule of law, the values of human rights, then we are only going to be talking about this. Young Africans know where they want to go. They envision a future, but they are stuck in a world where they are crushed with brute force. Now, this is the elephant in the room that I believe we must address. Other than that, we are only going to be looking at the promised land where we want to go as Africa, but we won't be able to move our footsteps to reach it because we cannot fight against the American dollars. We cannot fight against the Italian bullets. We cannot fight against the donations from the European Union that are just placed in Africa and they are siphoned and are used in patronage and crushing of voices of dissent. Like I mentioned, right now, as I speak, I'm only maybe able to leave the country because I have international focus on me. But thousands, hundreds of thousands of young people are rotting in torture chambers and in prisons in Uganda. Why? Because they dared to challenge the authority of the strong men, in particular General Museveni, who has been in power for 36 years. Now, this is a case in many African countries. And until the world, until the international community, in particular the European Union, until they address that, until they call to order those authorities, until they make democracy, real democracy, a precondition for cooperation, we are going to be moving in circles. But when we have an opportunity for the international community to say, no, we are not going to be part of the criminality, then the voices of young Africans are going to count. Like I said, I really envy the young people in other countries that just decide not to vote. In Uganda, we actually long for the voting and we line up the entire day to vote, but our votes don't count.
Thank you, Bobby. Yeah, I'm actually very proud of the resilience of the Ugandan youth to continue to push their case through the process, even though there's, as you said, there's a lot of effort to make sure that that doesn't count. And you also mentioned that this is the case across many African countries. I wouldn't disagree with you.